Today I'm joined by Jason, who is the CEO of SkillsVista and a former Commandant in the Irish Defence Forces.
Hi everyone.
So, thanks for coming on, Jason. So yeah, look, are you out of the army? Are you out of the army long now, or?
Yeah, I suppose. Look, I took a career break back in 2016 to 18, so I had dipped my toes in the private sector before I left, but I left fully. It's 2 years this month, so yeah, gone 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you miss it now that you're out, or are you happy you left?
Do you know what? I suppose it's like everything. I think the organisation had changed considerably over the 20 years I was in it, and I would miss aspects of it. Do you know what I mean? Like the camaraderie, the friends you make. Even when like I finished up in the Curra camp, and you're walking around, and all the familiar faces and stuff. Whereas a lot of the stuff I do now, I can work from home or actually meeting clients on site. So I don't have that kind of the same crack and camaraderie as you would have, inside. So I miss that, but there's certain aspects in that I wouldn't miss. Like, as in, it's one of the most secure jobs in the world, but you've very little stability. Like on a Friday, I can be told you're going to the Curra for 2 years on Monday morning when I was living in Cork and stuff like that. So, you can get away with it when you're a bit younger, but when you have a partner or a wife, it's a different story,
Yeah, definitely. And look, what first prompted you to join the Defence Forces? Was it something that you're always interested in? Like, did you play sports when you were younger? Or?
Do you know what? I think it comes down to fate. I'm from Mallow in Cork, and I wanted to play hurling at a higher level. So I said it to my parents, and I ended up going down to Combs in Fermoy, which is about 25 minutes away. And the career guidance teacher in Fermoy in St. Coleman's was married to an army captain. Okay. And I think I was dodging class one day, and I said, "Miss," I said, "what's the story? What options do I have?" And she said, "Have you ever thought about the cadets?" And I was like, "What's that, miss?" And she said, "It's the army." And I was like, "Can you tell me a bit more?" Even though my granddad was in the army, and so was my uncle. They didn't, my uncle didn't spend too long. I think it was for 3 or 4 years. But my granddad passed away probably when I was about 12. So I didn't know enough about it, if that makes sense. Yeah. But she said, "Look, you're sporty, you get on well with people. Look, would you not think about it?" And then I went home to my mum and dad, mentioned it, and then I think they said, "That's one lad off the books if we can get him in there." So yeah, I probably forgot it, and then spent 20 years of my life in it.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a couple of different career paths you can go down, right? So one is like enlisted, and the other one is commissioned.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to go down the commissioned route?
Again, I'd say it's because that lady, her husband was a captain, and she understood the cadet process and said, "Do you know what, will you apply for the cadets?" And then I actually said, "Do you know what, let's give it a go." Because the two choices I had at the end of that summer were it was basically civil engineering in CIT in Cork or the cadets. Right. And yeah, look, thankfully I picked the cadets. Look, I've learned a lot, seen a lot. There's pros and cons to everything. Yeah. But like I wouldn't be the person I am today without I suppose that the organisation, the friends, the mentors, the coaches, etc.
Yeah. Do you remember your first day then going in to start training?
I can. I can remember telling me I needed a haircut, even though I got a haircut the Friday beforehand. But it was a neck shave they were talking about or something like that. And I got a good few push-ups. I was a bit of a heat seeker. And then like you're smiling away and I'm smiling away, but it was like. Yeah, they didn't like cadets that enjoyed themselves. So I got plenty of push-ups in the first few weeks.
You kept in for a few weekends. Grant, and so you're in how long was the cadetship back then? Would it have been kind of 2 years back then, or 15 months, or?
Yeah, it was 21 months. It was in the middle of that. And I suppose it was very different. I was lucky that I suppose my last 2 years I went to boarding school to play hurling at a higher level. Okay. So I had kind of experience kind of being away from home, even though it was every weekend I was back. Yeah. But we didn't get out for the first 3 months. We went in early October, and we didn't get out until Christmas. So some people found that adjustment quite hard. But in saying that, there was 40 of us started training together. Sorry, 42. We lost 2 in the first week. It just wasn't for them. And then the rest of the 40, then we just helped each other through all the pain and suffering that you go through for the 21 months. But yeah, it was great.
Yeah, but 21 months, right? So during that 21 months, what happens coming towards the end of it? Are you allowed home then at the weekends or during the week, or are you still kind of kept in Monday to Friday?
Yeah, they like the power play. So what happens is, the first 3 months you don't get out. Then it goes to you get out maybe once every 2 months. Then it's once every 6 weeks. Then once every 4 weeks. Then once every kind of 2 weeks. So by the time you get to the end of the 21 months, you're out pretty much nearly every weekend because they're trying to adjust you back into civilization, and normality.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Grant. And once you're out, then where was the first unit you were posted to?
I was lucky enough that they actually allowed our class and our senior class to be posted to where we were from, because for a long time they didn't want newly commissioned officers going back to where they're from in case they were actually managing people that they knew from their towns or villages, etc. But that time it actually changed, which was great, because then it meant that I could settle back into my own town life, as in playing GA with the local teams, etc. So I was lucky. I was commissioned to Cork, the artillery unit in Cork.
Yeah, so one of the lucky ones, because normally if you're an officer and you're commissioned, you could be based on the opposite side of the country to where you're from, right?
Completely, because even there was a few guys from Cork that were initially posted to Donegal, which is as far as you could get from home. Do you know what I mean? And like, you'd be wondering like what was the top process behind it. I think they just, again, maybe it was just they wanted people to suffer, or maybe they wanted people to kind of break away from where they were from completely. Do you know what I mean? And kind of form new lives and new attachments, in those different locations. But for me, I was genuinely, I was very, very fortunate that I could actually go back into, some bit of a past life I had, but I was a very different person after like nearly 2 years in the army.
Yeah, I'd say so. And after, like, did you always stay then in Cork then throughout your whole career, or did you move around? Or
no, that was.
You weren't that lucky.
I'm glad you're laughing as well. No, it's very different. So like, as you said, there's different streams. So you can come in as a recruit, or you can come in as a cadet, or you can come in as a direct entry if you have your engineering, or if you're a doctor or a pharmacist, etc. So the scheme I went in through, when I finished my cadet training, I spent a year in Cork, and then they send you to college in Galway. So I spent 4 years in Galway learning, like studying business, HR and industrial relations. And then once that finished, then I had a few months in Cork, then I had 6 months in the Curragh. I had 7 months in Kosovo, back to Cork for a few months. I had 5 months in Chad, back to Cork for a few months. Then I had another 5 months in Chad. Then I came back in April 10. I did 3 months at the end of 2010 in the Curragh on an artillery standard officers course. Then I did my junior command and staff course for 6 months at the start of 2011. I had a year in Cork, 2 years in Dublin. I had 14 months in Sweden with a battle group force. I took a 2-year career break. And then I came back then to Cork for a few months. Then I was sent to Dublin to work in Director of Operations. I went to Lebanon then, and then came back to the Curragh, and then I decided to leave.
So quite a bit of bouncing around anyway. Of all the so you done 3 overseas trips, was it, or 4 including 5? Okay.
Yeah.
So was it Kosovo, Chad, Sweden count as an overseas, or is that?
It shouldn't, but it did.
Okay. Yeah.
I was lucky because my first trip was in Kosovo, and it was great. Genuinely, I was the ops officer. Kosovo got their independence in the middle of the trip, so like it went from the NATO bombings in '99 to get to them getting independence on the 17th of February 2008, which was phenomenal. So that was like, being honest, that was a class trip. It was my first trip. And then I went to Chad twice, once with the European Union, and then once with the United Nations, which was great to see both. The European Union went in initially to set up the camps, and then the United Nations came in and took over the camps. And then even working in Sweden with a battle group force. So, we joined up to Helsinki headline goal, which meant then that we contributed soldiers every so often to be participate in the European Union defense kind of policy. So that was a great experience working with 6 other nationalities in a headquarter force in Sweden. And then my last trip, then I was running operations for 571 soldiers in Lebanon, and then COVID kicked in the middle of the trip, which was great crack.
It's a tough one, I'd say.
It was it was so, being honest, it was so hard for everyone. And like, it's funny, like, everyone will be on LinkedIn and stuff like that, and they talk about resilience and they talk about everything. Like, really, do you know what? Like, military people have to be so resilient, and not even military people, military families, like, because there was people over with us, both men and women and they left families at home, and they were gone for meant to be 6 months, and it turned into 8.5. And that's a hard thing to try to explain to small kids and stuff like that.
You probably got paid for the extra 3 months. Sorry.
Jesus, like that's the other thing. Like they talk about the pay and all that, it's great, but you know what? You write off a lot of your life as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You can't get that time back.
No, you don't. Like I was late 30s, and you know what? It was the first time I actually didn't feel in control of my life, because the Secretary General of the United Nations made a decision that we weren't allowed to rotate. No military personnel were allowed to rotate home. So none of the military soldiers that were over from any nationalities knew when they were getting home.
Oh, okay. I said it was rough. Jeez. Don't know how I would have felt about that one.
Yeah. Very tough.
And so you've done like a couple of overseas trips. How long did it take you then from second lieutenant to get the captain? Was it a few years or 4 years?
So you did 2 years as a second Louis, and then it was 4/5 to get to become a captain. Yeah.
Okay. And then what was the process then from captain to commandant then? Is that another promotional course, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah. So basically there's a certain level of things that's expected of you. Nowadays you kind of should work a minimum in the brigade and then probably go to the Defence Force headquarters in Dublin. So I went to the Defence Force headquarters, did 2 years up there. Between captain to commandant, I did 3 overseas trips, and I was on my 4th one when I got promoted to commandant. And you also have to do a 6 months junior command and staff course, which is now it's a level 8 in leadership and management studies through Maynooth. So it's now recognised and certified as a qualification.
Okay. And is it a purely academic course that you do, or is it like in the field, like the way you do like a standards course or an NTO course?
There'd be
both.
Yeah, there's no tactics. Like you're not down leopard crawling. It's more strategic planning. Do you know what I mean? It'd be you're given a large document to actually review from your own perspective and then from an enemy perspective, and then you actually create an operational plan on the back of it, and then you go out and do recce's on the ground, see what it looks like. So it's more around that piece when you're taking that transition from being a captain to a senior officer and working as a staff officer, basically both at home or abroad, that you're able to fill that role and contribute to a high level.
Okay, brilliant. And so you're done now. You got to the rank of commandant. You decided to leave after the career break. You went back obviously for a period of time.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to leave then after 20 years? Like, why didn't you stay a bit longer, or was time just up for you? You had to kind of move.
Good question. I found it hard to actually transition back in when I took the career break. Okay. I got to see what the private sector was like. I got to see the way to reward people in the private sector that work hard. And unfortunately, I suppose when you're working in the public service, you all get paid the same, no matter how hard you work or no matter how good your performance is. Which I found a bit frustrating, I suppose, at times. And then you're looking at dealing with the department, and in different roles I would have been working with them, and there would have been a lot of flippant comments about the your duty money and which it's better than nothing, and I'm kind of going, no, it's not. Like, that's a complete wrong attitude. When I worked in the private sector, I got compensated for the time, effort that I put into different tasks, and now I come back into the organisation that I once loved, and you're telling me this is what I'm worth, which is sad and disappointing. And then when you start looking at, I suppose, career paths, like ultimately what rank could you reach? But again, we weren't in control of that, because the department in 2012 made a decision that we reorganised, and like, what's stopping them from making that same decision 3, 5, 10, 15 years time? So if I invest all of my time and life into an organisation that I'm not really in control of,
okay,
it could lead to like a lot of disappointment. Whereas if you leave into the private sector, yes, things are hard, things are different, etc. But I felt if I put the same amount of time and effort into the private sector as I would have in the defence forces, I'd be probably far more rewarded externally.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the corporate world, let's say it's a meritocracy, right? Whereas the defence forces is seniority and kind of points. So yeah, you go down that road. And the first job then when you left, did you have like a job lined up when you left, or did you have a business plan, or what was the course of action you took when you left?
I had a plan. So basically what I had done was I when I took the career break, I ran a management consultancy company for 2 gentlemen. So when I finished up, I got to get like basically one of the owners said, "Look, Jason, take whatever you want." So I had all the different documents, etc., to be able to create my own. So I created Apex Evolution, and I was lucky that I got one or two big clients straight off, and I built a really good relationship, I suppose, with the CEOs of those companies and helped them, I suppose, through I suppose a tricky time. One of them was going through a management buyout, and then there was a few others kind of going through an acquisition, other bits and pieces. And then that allowed me then to start building SkillsVista, which is really what I'm like. I'm unbelievably passionate about helping people and helping organizations. And do you know what? It really only became clear to me in 2018 when I went back into the army. I met an ex-army guy at an event, and he was a qualified life and executive coach.
Okay.
And I met with him in his house for about 2.5 hours. And he said, at the end of it, he was like, "Jason, you're after bringing me back years." He said, "Your enthusiasm, the whole lot for helping people," he said, "it's infectious." And he got me to do a thing called the Enneagram. And when I did it, you can be 27 different types of people. And all mine is around helping people. And I said, "You know what? I need to do more of that." So that's what I created, I suppose, Apex Evolution, and SkillsVista is all around helping people and helping businesses.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. And so you're with So you had two jobs, did you, before you had SkillsVista, or was it just the one?
No, I went straight. I retired I retired 2 years ago. This August. So I had kind of registered SkillsVista in advance of retiring. And then I set up SkillsVista was still conceptual. And what we did then is we basically registered a company very early in 2021, and then we started, we created a prototype and started testing the market with our solution, and then built out the system fully afterwards.
Okay, and so everyone knows, right? So what is SkillsVista? What does it do?
SkillsVista, SkillsVista is a strategic workforce planning platform, and it helps basically strengthen an internal recruitment process. So what we've done is, so back in 2012, I was one of the few people that was tasked with creating an upskilling plan for the defence forces, right? And we all know how complex that can be. So you have to get onto every unit to understand their training needs analysis, all the brigades consolidated, then it goes up to Defence Force headquarters, and it takes months. So that process took, I would say, 6 to 12 months, right? Okay. And with SkillsVista, you can get that information at the touch of a button, right? So we've simplified it down. We've created a system with 30,000 roles, and every role then is preloaded with a skills profile. The company deletes out the skills that aren't relevant, adds in skills that are, and then that's assigned to anyone with that role. When the employee logs in, they click on the skills that they have, and then the system then, once you hit training needs analysis, it will consolidate the training across the entire business. And then you can also, like, from a succession planning point of view, you can open up any job in your business, and it will show you the next candidates with either no skills gap or the shortest skills gap to fill that role. So, like, the thing at the moment, Connor, like you're in the recruitment space as well, and we both know that companies are suffering with regards to it. Last year on Indeed.ie, there was 22,000 open roles. Started this year, there was 66,000, right? Last week, there was 52,000, and we've taken an extra 50,000 people onto the actual workforce. So the problem is getting considerably worse. And then if you look at it across Europe, there's an employment service platform called Eures. Last year, 3.1 million jobs were open. Now, at the start of the year, was 5.1 million, or just over 5 million. So, like, every company is struggling to recruit and upskill personnel. Whereas with SkillsVista, it allows you to understand the actual skills profiles of the people who are already paying, like, as in your actual your employees. And then it shows the employees their career paths within the business, so you can actually get a more engaged workforce. And then if you have a skills gap, it will show you what training will bridge it for you as well.
Yeah. Where it might be good is, I'm just thinking here, right? So let's say you have an IT manager, right, going on maternity leave, okay?
Yes.
And you have a senior IT administrator on your team. What you, instead of going to agency or whatever to fill like the IT role the IT manager role on a contract basis, you might already have that skill set on your team, but you just don't recognize it. So by having everyone's, the skills matrix basically, at the click of a button, the company can identify the senior IT systems administrator that might not necessarily be in Dublin. They could be in Cork or maybe in the UK, but could transfer easily into the job in Ireland. The senior manager can see that, and then instead of going to agency, it might save them some money, right? they can recognize that talent internally and kind of put that person into the role. Is that basically how it would work?
100%, Connor. So I was chatting to an ex-army guy there recently. Great guy, senior NCO, and he left, and he was basically saying, like, the company he's working for, they use an Excel document, and it's very hard to understand everyone's profiles because they've over 1,000 employees, and what he was having a coffee with someone and said, look, we're looking to bring in a project manager in the next few weeks. The next thing the person goes, I actually have a project management qualification. And he was like, that conversation saved him 20 grand, right? And it's the same as you said, like with SkillsVista, right? It's just because companies, they can't get visibility on the qualifications and the skill sets, etc. So we actually do that for them. At a touch of a button, you can see very quickly whether someone has the skills or not. And the system is set up that it can have global reach. You can filter for jobs in different countries, etc. But it's all about maximizing the talent pool that you're already actually paying for, as opposed to like think about it. Imagine if you were sitting down and you're a project manager, right? Qualified project manager, and they bring in a person with project management to do change management, but to manage the project. You're going to be met with resistance because the person's going, you're actually getting paid way more money than me to come in to do something that I'm already qualified. And you want me to help you and do the work for you? Yeah. And that's part of the problem why some big changes don't actually work for businesses, because they bring in outside resources and they have the actual resources internally, like you said.
Yeah. It could also probably stop, like I know in IT, right? So the average tenure for an IT person is probably like 2 or 3 years in a company, and they move for progression, but they could identify that individual for the progression before they decide to move on. Or if they kind of, if they do a course that's outside of the company, and they can upload that skill set onto the company platform and then be recognized by the HR team or senior management that have access to that skills matrix as well, and kind of slot them in essentially.
Exactly. Or projects. If there was a project that came up that allowed them to kind of escalate a little bit towards the next level, they could, put them in charge of the project. So you're getting to kind of like, to test them in advance of actually give them the kind of a full role.
Yeah. And how do you think like companies will get buy-in from like their internal staff members to keep their skills updated on the system? Because I imagine every employee in the company would then have a profile that they need to keep updated regularly, right?
Yeah. So the reason I had a call there just before coming on here, and a person was asking me, Jason, is there more benefits for the employees or for the employer? And I started laughing. I said, you know what, that's a great question, and I'm delighted you're asking that, because you can see the benefits of both, right? So if an employee keeps their profile updated, right, it means they can actually see the career progression, see additional jobs that are available, or if a project's coming up, that they could actually, participate and support that particular project. Like if I was using SkillsVista, if it was a skill that wasn't directly, part of their current role, I would give a bonus to them for that, because it's outside of their actual role that they're actually being hired for, if that makes sense. So you could integrate it in bonuses, etc., around their participation and support on other company activities.
Yeah, definitely. Or even if there's a project ongoing in the company and the person, an internal employee, want to get exposure in a certain area, they could probably ask to be part of certain projects as well, right?
Yeah, and you can reach out to coaches and mentoring part of the platform as well. So like if you want to get some support or experience in a particular area, once the company has someone actually recognized as a coach or mentor, you can reach out to them as well. It's really about maximizing everything that's actually within the business.
Yeah. And so how long are you guys actually up and running now at the moment, or is it still kind of in the beta process?
No, like the platform is fully built. We won an education training board contract back in February, March, and we were startup of the month with the Irish Business Post in June. So we're making good progress and traction. With regards to the network pilot that we won, the education training board, some of the biggest companies in the world are coming onto that, and some of them are actually in the med device and pharma industry. So there's going to be a massive opportunity there, please God. And then we're talking to some of the skill networks as well, because with SkillsVista, we also have built. So we built a B2B platform, B2C platform, and a network dashboard. So for the network dashboard, the network administrator would be able to get a consolidated list of skills gaps across an entire network in a split second. So you can get real-time data with regards to labour markets requirements, which is a game changer. Like in Ireland, we spend $2 billion a year on public training, and it's very fractured and disjointed. It's probably a nice way of saying it.
Okay. Fair enough. And the system itself, right? So if a company integrates your platform into their current system, can they white label the platform for them, like put their own brand on it, or is it still labeled as SkillsVista?
Yeah, for the bigger companies, we can white label it. Do you know what I mean? Because again, it's worth it. It's worth it, I suppose, for us. You know, a lot of companies will probably use just the SkillsVista platform and can plug in from there.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So yeah, look, and are you guys only available in Ireland now, or are you available like throughout the world?
If you have connections anywhere in the world, my friend, I'm open to a call. And as well, anyone in the audience as well, just reach out to us.
We've got people listening in Australia, Canada,
All right.
some in Saudi as well. Saudi might be a good place for you to look, right? So,
Do you know what? This is my second podcast ever. I did a podcast with a HR lady in Singapore a few weeks ago as well. Because she heard about the system, thought it was really good, thought it had an awful lot of value, and she has a client base in the space and did a podcast on it. So you're right. So,
yeah. So what's next then for SkillsVista, just to kind of keep building the business and get more people on board?
Yeah, we haven't launched a B2C platform, right? So the B2C platform was the original concept. So what it would mean is that you or I or someone sitting in the comfort of their couch at home can open up their dream job, compare their skills profile against it, and then see what training would bridge their skills profile so they can compete for that job, right? To launch a B2C platform, it's very costly, and we need to get extra training content onto it. So we're talking to a massive company that turned over $1 billion last year, and they're looking at advertising some of their content on our system, which would be super. So I would like to launch, like we haven't even fully launched the B2B or the B2C systems yet. So in the next 2 quarters, hopefully we'll be launching both systems and really get some traction from the market. Because look, anyone we're showing the system to, they're saying it's a game changer. Like I went to the HR Learning Tech event in London a few weeks ago, and 2 competitors said this is the missing piece of the jigsaw.
Yeah.
So you have something here. Plus, like I had a call just before this with the head of product for a learning management system with 30 million users globally, and they're potentially looking at white labeling our system or strategic partnership with us because their clients want support with training needs analysis, skills profiling, skills taxonomies. There was 2 studies done recently. Korn Ferry estimate that there'll be 85 million open roles by 2030. So there's going to be a human capital deficit of 85 million. They're saying robots aren't the problem. It's actually people and skilled people being available for the roles. And then McKinsey's basically have said by 2030, 385 million people are going to need to be upskilled. So like, where do you go? Where do you go about it? Like, there's no one outside of us focusing on the roles and focusing on the skills. So we work backwards from what the company, the labor market needs, and then we connect in people with that.
Yeah, especially the B2C platform that you're showing before we kind of jumped on, it looks quite interesting, right? So if you're like a young person looking for a new job or whatever it is, and you don't really know what you want to do, you can kind of do, it's like a personality assessment that you can do to see what jobs best fit the personality that you have and the skill set that you currently have at the moment. And if you want to be, let's say, a doctor or an engineer, that basically will spit out what courses you need to undertake in order to get that job that you want, right? And the different steps and the different, I suppose, the entry level position all the way through to the senior position that you're actually looking for, right?
Yeah, like, so the more training and the more training providers advertise their courses by allocating skills to it on SkillsVista, the more and more value it's going to create, because then you can actually be able to filter for, I suppose, location, cost, etc. So imagine if you could see your dream job, see what your skills gap was, and then be able to filter for your particular budget. Like, that to me is a game changer. And just before we came on, Conor, remember I said it to you as well, it was like the reason we created SkillsVista was due to COVID. Like 3 years ago this September, we had 480,000 people on pandemic unemployment payment in Ireland, and they had lots of qualifications and skills profiles that are transferable. But people didn't know where to go or how to go about it. Like Intrio couldn't help them, ETBs couldn't help them. And I was lucky enough, like when I got the career break, they were looking for someone with a HR background, learning development background, and project management. And then they upskilled me on good documentation practice, good manufacturing practice, and the AIME quality course. So they realized that, with certain upskilling, I was ready to work in the medical device industry. Whereas we don't look at it that way. And even I was talking to Irish Manufacturing Research 2.5 years ago, and they said, Jason, are you creating a system whereby we'd be able to see the top candidates who had no skills gap or a short skills gap? And I said, that's what I'm building. He said, that would be a game changer for us, because certain roles and certain industries are struggling because unless you're in pharma med device, you don't automatically look at it as an option. Whereas you could be working in Apple or working in Dell or Intel or any of them, like, and you could have 80 or 90% of the skills that are transferable across, but you just don't think of it that way. And the same for us in the army. Like, we have massive profiles. Do you know what I mean? Like we take so much of what we do for granted. Like I was at a talk a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and one of the NCOs actually on the thing, he said it. He was like going, from the outset, right? When you're a private or recruit or even a cadet, he said, like, you're always given the commander's intent, 1 up and 2 up. So you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it for the bigger picture. But he said in industry, they just tell you to do something and you don't know why you're doing it or what it feeds into. And it was actually, you know what, it was a really good take on it. I was like, oh, that's so true. That like when you understand your purpose and why you're doing an activity, you can buy into it more. Like when I was helping that company in Germany, I was like, what are you doing? The next thing the person goes, I'm on a conveyor belt and I'm just putting this there. I was like, you're creating oxygenators. You're saving people's lives. It's used in bypass surgery. And he's like, I've never looked at it like that. And I said, my God, that's the way I'd be looking at this, going like, potentially I've saved like 50 people or 100 people today if, you know, whatever goes through your production line.
Yeah, because that is a big thing, right? So in the army, you understand the army machine, right? So you understand the bigger picture and you get a better understanding that your little part has a bigger part to play. In industry, you don't really get that. But then in the army, you've got a major, I suppose, arsenal of skills that you don't know how it transfers into the civilian world as well. So it could also help with guys transitioning out of the army into kind of civilian jobs.
Completely. Sure, when I did my master's, there was 26 army people doing a master's in supply chain management. And then, like, even when you look at it, so some people, it's funny and it's sad. Like, it's like, I was chatting to a senior NCO one day, and he went out in his PDL, and he went into a company, it was a garage, car dealership, and they were at a computer, and they had documents open. I think it was an Excel, and there was other bits and pieces going on. And next thing he said, well, you should do this, this, or this. And they're like, what? All you know is about guns and bullets. Do you know what I mean? and then he sat down and he showed them how to do it and how to, you know, do formulas and how to, you know. And I always say to people, it's like, you know, yes, it's a military, right? However, you still have all the core business functions, like you have logistics, operations, IT, communications, you know, HR, you know, etc. You know. And next thing, all of a sudden, you can see the cogs turning in people's heads. And then it's like, you know, and we're no different to a very large organization, you know, when we're at home. Obviously, when we're abroad, it's a very different mindset and stuff like that. But in general, it's all the same, you know, the same, like, when I took the career break, I was like going, people are people and processes are processes. And you know what? Thankfully, that is so, so true. And if you treat people with respect, you give them a voice, you listen to the voice, you don't have to do what they're asking. But even the fact you've listened to it, and you might come back with something that's, you know, half makes sense to them. They go, okay, at least they listen and justify it. And you might give 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4, you know what I mean, etc., just so that they keep engaging, right? But like, again, you know, what I found is if you listen to people, treat them with respect, you're going to get it back in spades, no matter what walk of life you're in or what job you're in. Yeah,
definitely. And look, the Defence Forces as a whole, right? So would you recommend it as a career option?
I would, but it'd be a short-term career.
Okay.
Yeah, like.
Would you recommend the cadetship as the entry method into the Defence Forces, or would you recommend the enlisted?
Joe, it wouldn't bother me, but like, I'll be totally honest, I suppose.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, it's like everything else, I suppose. Look, even if you come in as a recruit, like there's phenomenal opportunities there, right? And like the TTS scheme, training technician scheme, phenomenal. You know, you can go off and you can do the training technician scheme in, you know, like basically, you know, through the signals, through CIS, and like that qualification will get you a phenomenal job in the private sector down the line, etc. Right? But the reason I'm saying, to be honest, it's like that's not available to everyone. Do you know what I mean? And to get there can be quite hard, etc. So there are loads of opportunities within the organization, but you have to learn very quickly how to get them to work in your favor, etc. I suppose from the officer stream, it's a bit more straightforward. Do you know what I mean? You do the cadets, you're an officer, you spend X amount of time in each rank, you do your courses, you know, you go, there are criteria, etc. Like, you know, you do your courses, you go overseas, you go to Dublin. It's painful, you know, being away from home for 2 years to tick a box, you go back down, then you're waiting to get promoted potentially, you know, when do you get promoted, where do you sit in your class? it's not a great spectator sport because everyone can see, who's doing well, who's not doing well, etc. But no, like I think you would get an awful lot of value no matter what stream you enter into the organization. But I would say it's kind of like 10 to 15 years max. I would say kind of you're in for your 10 to 12. You're at a point in your career where you're young, you're learning. Like if you join at 18, you're exiting at 30 to 35. You're still going to give 30, 35 years to the private sector. And like, you won't even realize the learning you have. Like, you could put a private, into a room, and I guarantee you they'd probably lead that room and they don't even realize what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's the same, like, you can put an NCO in there, put an officer in there, like, you just take it for granted because in your basic training, it's you're automatically put into roles like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, an orderly with a recruit platoon, get right outside everyone, and you're tracking, counting them off. Everyone here, giving them a brief, after an NCO tells them to do something. Whereas you see people in, some people in the private sector, they're not used to even talking in front of people. They find it very daunting. Whereas, in the military, it becomes part of who we are and what we do. Because, if you don't communicate in the right way, well then, you're in the world of hurt, like.
Yeah. And then the communication is dragged out of you then at some stage.
It's true, but it's only when you sit back and look at it. So I would say any of the streams within the Defence Forces are valuable, but I would kind of cap it at kind of 10 to 15 years and probably in around the 12-year mark.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough. And then on the other side of it then, right, so guys that are looking at the kind of private sector now, what advice would you give them to kind of integrate into the corporate world?
It's probably understanding the language and the difference between military language and private sector language. Because when I'd left, I'd say about a month, and I had a call with an army guy that left in his late 90s, and he says, "You don't sound like a military person." You know what I mean? I was talking business jargon, and I think part of the problem in the military is how do you actually civilianize you and your qualifications? You know what I mean? Because like you mentioned earlier on about the skills, a quartermaster, would run any type of facility in the private or public sector. Do you know what I mean? Like there's an inventory management system, and it's just a different version of it or a different one, and it's the same with, training. There's a different learning management system or TMS, etc., used in the private sector, but ultimately you're actually assessing people's skills gaps, seeing what training will bridge it, getting the content created and bridging it. So it's really about understanding, I suppose, your actual career, and because your career can be so varied and diverse, which parts are you most passionate about, which parts would excite you, and then how can you civilianize that and get a job in the private sector? Or similarly, it's like, who do you know that's transitioning in that similar area? Because we have a massive network. Like I went to an OE event, and I think they said there's over 250,000 people that have served.
It's massive, yeah. I think
on the island of Ireland.
Yeah, I think that I don't know. I was at that as well. That was someone with Jim Gavin and Ray Goggins kind of chatting away, was it? In the brewer.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That was massive. Because there's a lot of and the veteran as well is getting younger. But I remember when I was leaving, right? So I actually went to speak to. I had a CV done. I was applying, and I wasn't getting jobs. So what I had to do was I had to go and I spoke to a career psychologist, and I told them everything that I'd done, and they grilled me, and they put together a cover letter, and they translated my CV into kind of civilian wording, you might say, and then I was able to get it. That's how I got my first job when I left. So it's being able to try now. The likes of AI now will probably help or SkillsVista. But yeah, it's understanding how you kind of channel what you've done in the army and kind of put it into wording that other people are gonna understand. Like that's what I'm saying.
Because we don't do KPI metrics. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's massive as well. Yeah.
It is. I remember saying to someone that was looking at leaving, I said, well, like look at operation readiness stats for last year, and then look at them for this year, and what kind of improvements you made and increases, etc. So it's just throwing in a few like that can help, etc. You know what I mean? So it just depends.
Yeah, because we don't have in the army. I think Graham, who went into Transdev, he was saying he was a driver in the army, and then he got promoted to an NCO, and he was saying, like, you did actually have KPIs in the army. Like, you had to be on time, you had to be where you said you were going to be at a certain time. So that was actually a KPI, but it's understanding what is a KPI in the army, even though it's not pointed out specifically to kind of be able to put it onto the CV. It's massive.
Yeah.
Even for us. Yeah. So yeah, that's. Are you happy enough? Are you kind of? Do you have anything else then you want to add, or?
No, look. I suppose the key thing with a lot of it is, look, I think 99% of anyone that left the army wants to help anyone that's even still in the army or that's exited the army. I've had a great experience of reaching out to people. Like, one person said, Jason, I'm in this role for another 10 months before I have to retire. Use me for the 10 months. And I never even met the person before it, like,
Okay.
So we are one big family, and it's about, reaching out to people that you think will help you, and not being shy about it or not being proud. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the journey I'm on is the hardest journey I've ever done in my life, bar none, genuinely. Like, trying to create a tech company and a startup, in an area where you don't have a name, you don't have credibility, you have to create the network, is unbelievably hard. So I've had to look through my LinkedIn connections, see who's potentially in a position to shape or influence or open a door, and reach out to them, because without it, you're not going to, to survive. So just don't be proud, don't be afraid, and reach out. I'm sure Connor's the same. Reach out to Connor, reach out to me. I'll do whatever I can to help anyone.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I might do after, like, once I'm gonna try get 21 podcast episodes of like people that are in the defense forces, and maybe start like a WhatsApp group chat. I don't know if there is some already, but maybe call it like foster or buddy kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like guys that have left, and then guys that are transitioning, so they can kind of put it into the group, like any kind of questions that they have, like even about jobs that they're in, like, oh, how would you handle this situation, or what would you do, and everyone kind of get their input and give them a bit of advice.
Even Connor, what I thought about one day was like, with the likes of the O&E, that we could create an O&E version of SkillsVista, and all of us could have profiles on it, and you could search for skill sets, you could search for coaches, search for mentors, and even connect people in even better that way. Or like, again, if you're giving everything for free, you could give maybe a 70% discount or 50, like whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? Depending on what they want or what support they need, etc. But that I thought that could be a really good way around it, because like even a WhatsApp group, it's only the people on the group that get the benefit. It's like externally, how can you connect in with it, like,
Yeah, definitely, it's a good idea. We definitely have to do more, like, to get, because there's like obviously the guys that are leaving, there's good skill sets that are looking to leave, and if you can capture that and bring it into like an organization that you know of, where someone won't let you down, the organization and the individual will benefit from it. So there's definitely a gap there. But
you
yeah,
see, that, Connor, actually, just anyone that leaves probably brings in one or two army people after them within a period of time.
Yeah, that's what I've seen. Because a couple of guys that I've had on was like, even like, I think we posted a job for Will that was on. I think like 3 or 4 maybe army guys applied then to the job, like, so. And then Securitas as well, Stephen, I think he's working with like 4 or 5 ex-army guys that he helped bring in. But as well, it's when you're interviewing for jobs as well, like, you need to interview for the job that you're interviewing for, and not talk about the 20 other jobs that you had in the army. Talk about the one job that you had in the army that's specific to the job that you're applying to.
Yeah, 100%. And then cater for your CV. So whatever job you're applying for, whatever's most relevant, put at the top.
Yeah.
Just so they understand why you're applying for, because otherwise it could be the third one down. They're like, they may have actually thrown away the CV at that stage. They're on, sure, this isn't a person that does logistics, and your quartermaster job was probably your second last or third one or whatever it was,
Yeah. So you have to kind of tailor the CV as well. But yeah, look, it's good to know. Grant, but look, thanks very much for coming on. It's much appreciated, and we'll get the link. If anyone wants to learn more about SkillsVista, we'll put the link in the description below, and a link to Jason's LinkedIn profile if you want to reach out to him for any advice. But just one more question before you go, right? So,
sure.
moving from like the army, right? I remember at that event, right, there was a question asked: do you think the Defence Forces creates entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it creates entrepreneurs, or do you think it creates leaders, or both?
I think it creates leaders. It doesn't create entrepreneurs. Like, if you look at the way it's set up that you conform. You don't question authority. Like, you've seen it and I've seen it, no matter what level you're at within the organization. Like, when you're in a room, certain people in that room are talking, and others are probably slow to voice what they think or to go, well, what about this? I wasn't genuinely, but like I'd be genuinely, I'd be a little bit different. As a cadet, I would still have been the same, and I probably got into trouble on numerous occasions for it. But like I question things. It's like, you know, like for example, it's like, you know, we're looking at having like presidential guard of honor, and it could be like 50 or something. And next thing I'm going like, we barely have enough to put on guard. Like, why are we sending 50 up to Oris? Like, and next thing someone would say, but the regulation says it. Why can't we change the regulation?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know, like, stop saying it's just because it was done this way in the past. It's like, how can we make it as easy as possible to deliver on our, like, I suppose, like, what's the purpose behind the organization, right? And then how can we do that in the most, you know, straightforward way without impacting or affecting our members? Because unfortunately, the way sometimes we go about things, it's like, it's like, how can we make this as difficult as we can for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's not the way to go about it. I'm not saying you cut corners, but it's like, you know, like for example, there it was like, you know, I remember we went up for the papal visit, right?
Yeah.
So the way it was set up before was senior army officers, you don't get the extra allowance, right, for those activities until COVID kicked in, and then they basically all got it. But like, I remember leaving. We met in the barracks at lunchtime. We got up to Dublin. We went to bed around 11 o'clock. I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We walked down to Phoenix Park. We're there all day on the feet. You know, they didn't have a crazy amount of people there supporting people going into positions, etc. We were advising, you know, helping people, the whole lot. You know, didn't get back home till God knows what time. And I got nothing extra for it, like. And you're kind of going, like, there's something amiss here. There's something wrong. But like, you know, who questions it, and how can you question it? Do you know what I mean? And like, so when I was sitting in the auditorium and they're on about like creates entrepreneurs, I was like, I don't think so. I would say you have it. You either have it in you or you don't. Do you know what I mean? And if you see opportunities and you see things wrong, like you're probably like, I would say anyone that kind of maybe feeds into the lessons learned process or continuous improvement mechanism in the organization would be some sort of maybe entrepreneurial minded, because you're looking at things a little bit differently. We're doing it this way, but we can change it, we can improve, and then you're trying to feed in that way. So certain things like that, but like outside of that, like it's group think. Do you know what I mean? We do our activities a particular way. It's all process driven. You know, you don't really question authority too much. You know, if you do, you're probably stood to attention. It's like, or you're waiting for that officer to rotate or senior NCO to, when are they moving out of that job? In 6 months' time, maybe I'll chat to the new manager, etc. So I would say no. I know they're bringing in the RDI, the research development institute part of the organisation. But even with that, like, sure, like before I left, I told them I was trying to create a SkillsVista version for the defence forces, so like a private recruit could say I want to become a commandant, and they would have been able to see exactly what was needed. You know, do a POTS course, do potential officers course. But the organisation said no, and all they had to do was the organisation, my bosses, so up as far as colonel level, they said yes, but then the general said no, because they didn't understand how it would interact with the TMS and the PMS that were 20 years old. And I'm kind of going, we have a retention crisis. We're in a world of hurt internally within the business, within the organisation. And I was looking for 52k from the Public Innovation Fund outside of the Army coffers, and they wouldn't even approve it to see if we could get the funding. And I was going to create a bespoke SkillsVista version for them. And like that to me would just show you how, I suppose, narrow-minded and insular they can be at times. So hopefully that research department, provides some value or a mechanism for people to kind of feed in and support, that innovation piece and the entrepreneurship/intrapreneurship.
Yeah. Do you think that's a problem? Like I call it the granddad thinking, right? So because it takes so long, right, to get to like a certain rank or to be like a real decision maker in the army, right? In terms of like, and they're not up to speed on like how tech works and how technology can like streamline an organization's processes.
It's a very different skill set, right? And it's not one that you'd kind of associate it with the military. Do you know what I mean? And like, look, you can cut this out, like, being honest with you, if you want, right? But it's like for me, I was actually disappointed because in 2015, the organization basically asked me to review the performance management system, or early 2016. But then I got the opportunity to go work externally, right? And then I put in a learning management system for a medical device company, so I understood LMSs, right? I had done the training needs analysis back in 2012 with one or two others. And then I was actually creating a tech company that was all around succession planning, talent management, intern recruitment, workforce planning, most of which we're actually not that great at and we're struggling at.
Yeah.
And they would have been in a great position to shape it. And they basically didn't sign off on it. And like, I think if I was ever going to question whether it was a right decision to leave or not, that was just proof in the pudding, like going like, this is madness. Do you know what I mean? And like, I picked up the phone and I rang a very senior person in the organization and I said, sir, can you take a quick call? And he said, I'm under a bit of pressure. But in fairness to him, he took the call and he just said it was too late. The timelines were just too late because they told us we didn't get it about an hour before the actual deadline date. And I was like, you're kidding me. So even though I potentially had a route where I could have made a few phone calls and potentially got, a different outcome, it was just too late in the day, Connor. And like, that was a person that was just too insular in their thinking. And I think that's what you're talking about. They just kept looking inside the organization to solve the problems as opposed to looking outwardly. And like in some militaries, like in the US military, like you spend time in industry to see the way industry operates and to learn, and you come back in. Whereas like when I took my career break, I was now 2 years behind all my peers, even though I ran a management consultancy company that made 5.1 million year one and 9.6 million year two. Do you know what I mean? And like, did phenomenally well and was rewarded for it, etc. But like, that wasn't captured anywhere when I came back in. And if I went for interview, I was after dropping 2 years of seniority.
Yeah, because that was my next question then. Do you think like there should actually be like a forced career break, almost like a transition year, right? When you're in secondary school for officers, so that they go into industry, whether it's big pharma or manufacturing, whatever it is, see how they do things and then bring it back in and implement it into the defense forces or like the military, right? And that would be definitely beneficial to an organization, especially if they took on board like what we were bringing back.
I would say yes, and I would say probably for senior NCO as well. Because at the end of the day, some people can talk to someone a particular way in the military. You won't get away with that in the private sector. And you do need to be thinking bigger picture all the time. Like in the private sector, since I worked in the private sector, like, it's a different mindset. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're in the defense forces and public sector, you do have an awful lot of security. Like from us, we didn't have the stability. You know what I mean? But in the private sector, you're working with companies, and if I'm working with them in a managing consultancy capacity, some of them could be concerned about their jobs, and some of them could be concerned about, I suppose, the longevity of the business, depending on what's going on in the market. And I try to put myself in a position of the employees, the management, etc., so that when I'm looking at making a change or recommending a change, that it is fairly sympathetic to to everyone within that, I suppose, within that decision, but ultimately focusing on the business requirements, because ultimately that will provide safety to far more people than maybe looking after one or two, etc.
Yeah, definitely. And because that was another thing that came up. Like in the army, you're paid to do what you're prepared to do, essentially. Whereas in the corporate world, you're paid to be effective, right, and make money and be as cost effective as possible.
I'd say even that's changing now, being honest with you, because you looking at some people, it's like they nearly actually think as if they're actually getting a salary to come to work. Not to mention delivering. Do you know what I mean? And I'd be like, no.
Yeah.
There's a full list of roles and responsibilities part of your job description. That's what you need to do, and how can I help and support you do that to the best of your ability, so that you can deliver, more for your company. But I think that's a generational thing as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
The younger, it's just a little bit different.
Yeah, the younger generation. I suppose it's like there's instant gratification, right? Like it's the one click generation we call it here in the office, right? So like you can literally like click on your phone and get something like instantly. You're like,
Yeah.
you're entertained like every 10 seconds when you scroll on like Instagram or whatever it is. You see like, these TikTokers or YouTubers making millions. Whereas, you know, if you're in a everyday kind of Joe Soap, you know, you still have to go to work for whatever it is, you know, your 30,000 or 25,000 starting salary to kind
Yeah.
of build on that to grow out the
The real
salary.
world.
Well, I think when I first joined the army, we used to be called the PlayStation generation. But yeah, sure. Look, it's all madness. But look,
I joined in '99, so I don't know what Xbox, I suppose.
so, but look, the entrepreneurial journey, right? So, is it something that you'd recommend for anyone, like, or
No.
yeah, yeah? Do you
But it
enjoy it? Like,
depends.
are you glad that you went down that route? Like,
No, I am. The reason I'm saying that, Connor, is it's a case of like, so if I just did the management consulting, 100%, great, love it, enjoy it, right? Um, I suppose I just want people to go into different things with their eyes open. Like,
yeah,
the costs associated with creating a tech startup are considerable, right? The percentage of companies that are going to be successful in the space is extremely low. Like, if you're looking at going for funding, the numbers are tiny. Like, if the number of companies I think that actually would qualify for VC funding is like nearly 1 in 10,000 or something mad. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
So like, it's, if you're getting into it, it's worth talking to someone or even paying for someone to understand the level of investment that's needed, both financially and from a time perspective, to make that company, I suppose, I was going to say make it successful, but even to make it competitive to the point where it could be successful. So like, I remember when I started, it was like, build a platform, right? That was a massive achievement for me, but that was only the start point, right?
yeah,
Then it's like, so when I started building the platform back in August, 2 years ago, I also started looking at strategic partnerships with
okay,
companies and with different networks, right? And I started looking at my LinkedIn. So at the time, my LinkedIn, I had only about 300 connections. Now I'm up around 2,500, and most of them are actually in my target market, right? So they're L&D managers, L&D directors, HR directors, chief operations officers, CEOs, some people in the tech space, because I want to kind of keep abreast of what's going on and stuff like that. So I suppose, yeah, have to nearly know 3 or 4 steps down the line, because if not, you do one part, finish it, then you're starting the next part, but it might take 2 or 3 months. So you're better off starting that halfway through phase 1, if you know what I mean,
yeah,
in order for everything to start flowing a little bit quicker. Because initially I was told it'd take a few months to build a platform. It took nearly 12 months. And then we had to redesign the platform. So like, we told functionality, like from the functionality point of view, it was really good, really strong. But for the user interface, the UI and UX, user experience, it wasn't as good as the platform itself. So then I
yeah,
had to look at rebranding and redesigning the platform. So we did that. And then that takes time, takes effort, takes money. And then you're looking at all the reach out. So like, as a startup, right, 2 months is a lifetime, right?
yeah,
2 months for a large organization that you're not priority for is nothing. Do you know what I mean? Even if you're on the radar, like a strategic partnership could take 12, 18 months to turn into something, or to bear fruit. So it's about like,
oh, yeah, so,
into the entrepreneurial journey, it's really doing it with your eyes open. And that's what I said at the start. I was just kind of like being kind of facetious, kind of laughing. It was like,
yeah,
would I do SkillsVista if I realized how hard it was going to be at the time? I probably would have, because I believe in it 100%. Do you know what I mean?
okay,
But there's been days where I'm looking at myself going like, can I execute this? And my wife, supporting me has been great. But like, gratuity from the Defence Force into the company, building the platform, all them, like anything I'm making in the consultancy has gone into building the platform, etc.
yeah,
So as I say to people, it's like every morning I get up, I put on my big boy pants. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, this is for real. So I suppose the one thing I'm saying is, if you are engaging or thinking about that, I'm not saying don't do it, but what I'm saying is, make sure you do really good, strong customer discovery, understanding the market, understanding, the problems that they're facing, and how your solution is going to be a differentiator. Because if it's not, you're wasting your time, effort, and money. And I think that's the key part. It's, get to that point as quickly as you can with it.
yeah. Okay. And just out of curiosity, have you looked at like different funding options from like venture capitalist or like the SE or SBCI loans or anything like that, or Enterprise Ireland? Have you spoken to any of those guys, or are you all like self-funded at the moment?
So we're self Yeah, we're self-funded up until now, but like we applied for CSF, competitive start fund,
Okay.
and we were in the like we were acquiring another startup at the time, and they thought that we were going to use the money for the acquisition, which wasn't the case, so we didn't get that. We missed out on pre-seed start fund last September by 1 point, right?
Okay.
So like this is the journey, like that can be like frustrating, and that's what I was saying about the resilience piece. It does help an awful lot. Whereas this time around, we've gone through the first 2 rounds of pre-seed start fund, and we're hoping to know soon. And if we are successful, you basically get 100 grand's worth of a convertible loan note. But it also kind of puts you on Enterprise Ireland's radar, obviously, because you're part of them now. And then,
Yeah.
like, if we do go for a round of funding, then Enterprise Ireland would potentially match it. We'd be a high-performance startup company, and then they would probably match fund it. So we've been told by a crowdfunding platform that they would be able to get us funding, and there's UK investor looking at investing and stuff like that. But it's like everything else. The further I am down the line, the less equity I'm giving away, the more valuable the company is, etc. So I suppose we have some massive companies coming onto the pilot in the next few months, and when we get them onto it, then that will actually have potentially, it should have a steady revenue stream in 12 months' time. And then that would put a different valuation on the company. But it is really good and really positive where we are. Like that call a while ago, like head of product for a company that have over 30 million users globally. Last week, managing director of the Irish branch for a company that turned over $1 billion. Do you know what I mean? So it's like we're on the right track, but it's still tricky and still tough, because if I go for round funding, it takes me out of the business for 6 months, pretty much.
Yeah, because you're putting together presentations or whatever, and business plans. Grant, okay, look, I know we said we'd wrap up there about a half an hour ago. We kept going.
Sorry, everyone.
No, you're fine. But thanks very much for coming on.